The night at the hospital was serene, with emergency lights casting a soft glow on the sterile walls, fostering an atmosphere of tranquility. Nurses and doctors on the night shift shared hushed conversations, the sporadic sound of footsteps reverberating through the deserted corridors. The evening appeared routine until the automatic doors at the main entrance gradually parted. Everyone expected a patient, but instead, a German shepherd emerged, its fur caked with dried mud, its deep eyes mirroring both weariness and determination. This was Duke, a retired canine who had once served honorably in the police force. Duke moved with cautious purpose, clutching something in his jaws, a small bundle wrapped delicately in an old cloth. The nurses exchanged bewildered glances. One hesitated but soon stepped forward, curiosity outweighing fear. As the bundle was carefully opened, it felt as though the room's air had vanished. Inside lay a baby, tiny, frail, and struggling to breathe, its skin pallid, its chest rising and falling unevenly. "Oh my God, it's a baby," a nurse gasped, her voice quivering with shock. The night's stillness shattered as the emergency room sprang into action. Nurses and doctors mobilized, their rapid footsteps echoing through the halls, equipment swiftly prepared as the medical team worked to stabilize the fragile infant, each second ticking like an urgent countdown. No one in the emergency room could fathom what they were witnessing. A dog had entered the hospital carrying a baby on the brink of death. Duke stood motionless, silent, and composed, showing no fear or distress, yet his eyes held a desperate plea for help. Though the nurses and doctors were seasoned with countless emergencies, they had never encountered anything like this. "Quick, check his breathing and heart rate," a doctor ordered, galvanizing the team. Another nurse knelt beside the bundle, hands trembling as she unwrapped the cloth. The baby's skin was icy, his small body smeared with dirt, his breathing faint and irregular. "This child is severely dehydrated and malnourished," the lead doctor said gravely. "We need Infor now. We must stabilize respiration immediately." The heart monitor emitted a slow, weak beep, underscoring the crisis. A nurse connected the baby to an oxygen supply, carefully adjusting the flow. Everyone worked in silence, the tension palpable as they raced to save the baby's life. As the team focused on the infant, one nurse kept glancing at Duke. The German shepherd remained by the entrance, unmoving, his gaze locked on the child as if awaiting a miracle. He didn't bark or growl. He simply watched, his eyes conveying an intelligence and urgency that felt almost human. "This is so strange. How did he know to bring the baby here?" the nurse murmured, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief. No one had an answer. All they knew was that Duke had acted as if this were his life's most critical mission. The doctors worked tirelessly. One nurse adjusted the baby's oxygen levels while another checked his body temperature. "Still weak, but his vitals are starting to stabilize," someone reported quietly. The room's tension eased slightly as the baby's condition showed faint improvement, though everyone knew this was just the beginning. The child remained critical, yet thanks to Duke, he now had a fighting chance. Duke, though visibly exhausted, never looked away from the baby. The room fell into a brief, profound silence as the staff grasped the extraordinary event that had unfolded. News of the bizarre incident spread rapidly through the hospital. Within minutes, the police were called for support. Officer Bennett, the lead investigator, arrived with his team. As they entered the emergency room, nurses recounted the surreal story, their faces still etched with shock. "We have no idea where the dog came from," the head nurse explained, her voice trembling. "He brought the baby in, placed him on the floor, and just stood there. That's all we know." Officer Bennett narrowed his eyes, taking in Duke near the entrance. "A dog carried a baby to the hospital? That's hard to believe," he muttered, though his expression softened as he noted Duke's calm, yet watchful demeanor. "Has anyone tried scanning for a chip?" Bennett asked. A young officer stepped forward with a scanner, and cautiously approached Duke. But as he got too close, Duke backed away, his posture tense but not aggressive, his eyes sharp and alert, as if warning them to keep their distance. "This dog's been trained," the young officer remarked. "He might be a retired canine." Bennett nodded and stepped closer, his movements slow and non-threatening. "Easy there, buddy," he said softly. Duke studied him for a moment before allowing the officer to clip a leash onto his collar. "Let's see where he came from," Bennett instructed, signaling his team to follow. Duke began to walk, his steps deliberate and steady, as though he knew exactly where he was headed. The officers followed closely, the flashing lights from their patrol cars casting long shadows on the pavement. They moved through the city streets in silence, tension growing with each block. "Where's he taking us?" one officer murmured. Finally, Duke stopped in front of an old, dilapidated house in a deserted part of town. The front door was ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry. Bennett frowned. "This is it," he said quietly. The officers exchanged wary glances before cautiously approaching the entrance. The smell of mold, stale air, and rotting food hit them as they stepped inside. Duke led them through a cluttered living room and toward a small door at the back of the house. "Stay sharp," Bennett ordered, his voice low and tense. When they opened the door, they found a small, dimly lit room. In one corner stood an old, dusty crib. Around it were scattered signs of recent occupancy, an empty dog food bowl, a tattered blanket, and a few children's items strewn across the floor. Duke slowly approached the crib and sniffed the spot where the baby had once been. "The baby was here," an officer whispered, his face hardening as he took in the scene. Exhausted, Duke finally collapsed beside the crib, his body going limp as though he was allowing himself to rest for the first time, his mission complete. The officers continued their search through the abandoned house, their flashlight beams cutting through layers of dust in every corner. The wooden floor groaned under their boots with each cautious step. Everything inside spoke of long-term neglect. Chairs were overturned, cabinets stood empty, and the dining table was littered with crumpled papers. "It looks like whoever lived here left in a hurry," one officer remarked, flipping through the scattered documents on the table. Meanwhile, another officer explored the kitchen. The sink was full of dirty dishes, and a faint odor of rotting food lingered in the air. On the countertop, a crumpled envelope caught his attention. He picked it up, opened it, and found a handwritten letter inside, the writing shaky, as if penned under extreme stress. "There's a letter here," he announced, then began reading aloud. "I no longer have the strength to care for him. Everything around me is falling apart. All I have left is Duke, and I know he'll do the right thing. I hope that one day someone will forgive me." His voice trailed off as the final words echoed in the stillness. The letter wasn't signed, but its message was painfully clear. The author had reached a point of utter desperation, entrusting their child to the only companion they had left, their loyal dog, Duke. "Duke has been watching over the baby this whole time," one officer murmured, glancing at the German shepherd lying beside the crib. Duke remained motionless, though his ears twitched slightly, still alert to his surroundings. "We need to find the mother," Officer Bennett ordered firmly. "We have enough evidence to know she's in serious trouble." The officers began canvassing the few neighbors who still lived in the area. After some time, they found an elderly man who remembered the previous occupant of the house. "I remember the young woman who lived here," the man said, leaning on his cane. "She was always with a large dog. That must be him, right?" He nodded toward Duke. "I think she was going through a hard time. I saw her with a baby a few months back, but then she just disappeared." The story was becoming clearer. The woman had been overwhelmed by hardship, and in a moment of despair, she placed her trust in Duke, the dog who had protected her family to the very end. Based on clues from the letter and the neighbor's account, the police widened their search. After several hours, they received a report about a young woman wandering in an exhausted state at a nearby park. When the team arrived, They found her sitting motionless on a bench, clutching herself tightly against the cold. Her eyes were vacant, her face gaunt, and her hair unkempt. Officer Bennett approached cautiously, maintaining a serious but non-threatening tone, choosing his words carefully. "We found a child who was brought to the hospital. A dog led us to an abandoned house nearby. Do you know anything about this? We need to ensure the child's safety." At the mention of the child, the woman's eyes widened in shock and hope. "Elias? Is it my son? Is he alive?" she stammered, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her face. She brought her hands to her mouth, her body shaking with emotion. Bennett exchanged glances with his team, recognizing they had found the right person. He nodded gently and reassured her, "We found him. Elias is currently receiving treatment at the hospital. He's stable, but still under observation." Lydia broke down in sobs. After days of despair, she finally heard a glimmer of hope. Medical personnel quickly placed her on a stretcher to assess her condition as they headed back to the hospital. Lydia began to tell her story. "Elias's father abandoned us right after he was born," she said, her voice hoarse with pain. "I tried to hold on, but everything fell apart. We ran out of food, out of money. I couldn't keep going." Lydia paused, her eyes distant as she relived the dark memories. "Duke, he was always there for us. He never left my side or Elias's. When I was too weak to go on, I told Duke. I asked him to take Elias somewhere safe." Silence filled the ambulance as the officers and medical staff absorbed the gravity of her words. The idea of a dog guiding a child to the hospital seemed impossible, yet Duke had done exactly that. When the ambulance arrived at the hospital, Lydia was escorted to the pediatric care unit, her heart pounding as she approached the door. Despite his exhaustion, Duke stood and walked beside her, his gaze steady and vigilant. Inside the room, Lydia saw her son lying on a small bed, surrounded by medical equipment. His breathing was steady, and his skin no longer looked deathly pale. Tears filled her eyes as she gently placed her hands on his tiny face. "Elias, my baby," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Duke stood silently at the doorway, watching over them with calm, observant eyes. Lydia turned to him, overwhelmed by gratitude. "Thank you, Duke. You saved my son. You saved my family," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. The doctors and officers stood quietly, moved by the profound moment unfolding before them. Duke was no ordinary dog. He was a protector, a silent hero who had fulfilled his mission with unwavering loyalty and love. Lydia was allowed to stay by Elias's side as doctors continued to monitor his condition. After several hours, Elias began to show clear signs of recovery. Though still weak, he started to respond faintly to his mother's familiar voice. Lydia gently held his tiny hand, her eyes filled with love and hope. Duke lay near the doorway, his body still weary but his ears alert. The doctors and nurses who had witnessed the entire story couldn't hide their admiration for the loyal dog. One nurse smiled and gently patted Duke's head, whispering, "You're a real hero. Thanks to you, this little boy is alive." Duke wagged his tail slightly, as if he understood the heartfelt praise. Lydia looked at Duke with deep gratitude. "You saved us, Duke. I'll never forget what you've done," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. After a few days of treatment, the doctors confirmed that Elias was out of critical condition and steadily improving, thanks to the dedicated care of the medical staff. The boy was slowly regaining his strength. Meanwhile, social workers at the hospital stepped in to help Lydia secure temporary housing and access essential support. The day of Lydia's discharge arrived on a bright, sunny morning. She held Elias in her arms, her face showing both exhaustion and renewed hope as she stepped through the hospital doors. Sunlight bathed her son's face, and Elias opened his eyes wide in curiosity, gazing at his mother before giving her a small, gentle smile, the first she had seen in days. Duke walked beside them, his posture steady but alert, as though he still had a duty to protect them. Lydia stopped, bent down to stroke Duke's head, and whispered, "We made it, Duke. Thanks to you, we have a chance to start over." News of their emotional story had spread throughout the local community. When Lydia arrived at her new home, strangers showed up with small gifts for Elias: clothes, food, and toys. Some even offered job opportunities to Lydia, eager to help her rebuild her life. The first few days in their new home were challenging, but with the support of kind neighbors and Duke's unwavering loyalty, Lydia knew she no longer had to face everything alone. She watched as Elias crawled across the floor, his bright, lively eyes full of wonder. "We made it through, Duke," she said softly, stroking the dog's head. Duke looked at her with his calm, wise eyes, as if to say he understood. Duke's story was not just one of miraculous survival. It was a testament to love and loyalty that transcended all boundaries. Lydia, Elias, and Duke's emotional journey had ended with a hopeful new beginning. But this story teaches us something even deeper. The power of loyalty, love, and sacrifice can change a family's destiny forever. If you found this story inspiring, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your feelings in the comments below and tell us what you think about Duke's incredible courage and the family's journey to survival and hope. Hit the like button if you want to help spread this uplifting message to more people, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this one. We are thrilled to have you as part of our growing community of people who cherish meaningful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.